Lorentz transformations destroy the very concept of length. Therefore, it is out of the question that there can be length contraction of a body in motion following from these transformations, as the media incessantly repeats, falsely presenting it as one of the symbols and great discoveries of modern physics. Observe a stationary system capital K and a system lowercase k moving uniformly and rectilinearly with respect to it at a constant velocity v. Let us take for simplicity that speed of light is unity, and that velocity of the uniform rectilinear motion is 0.6 of the speed of light. Then the coefficient beta becomes 1.25. Imagine now that the beginning and the end of a rigid rod, depicted here in green, are at x0 and 1 at time t0. Here is the same illustration with eta and zeta removed to avoid clutter, because they're equal to y and z. There is something very important to be noticed, however, namely that while in the stationary system capital K, the time at t0 is 0 everywhere along the length of the rod. When Lorentz transformations are applied, the end of the rod is no more at time 0, and the time at the end of the rod differs from the time at the beginning of the rod. So according to Lorentz transformations, the two ends of the rod do not exist at the same time. In order to say that this rigid rod has length, it needs to have at every given moment both ends existing at the same time. Lorentz transformations, however, derive that when moving, the time at one end of that rod is always different than the time at the other end of that same rod. This not only means that we cannot speak of length contraction, but it means that we cannot speak of length of the rigid rod to begin with. According to Lorentz transformations, only the part of the body at one single x at a given t exists. All other parts of the body being either in the past or in the future. Most importantly, at no moment can the time in any place of the moving system be different from the time in the stationary system, because all points of the moving system at every moment inevitably coincide spatially with points in the stationary system having the same time at that moment. It is an absolute truth that in a given place, at a given moment, time can only have one single value and not two different values as the Lorentz transformations derive. Therefore, the conclusion following from the Lorentz transformations that the time at the beginning of the rod can be different from the time at the end of the rod is in conflict with the absolute truth. Of course, should one need to correctly transform spatial and temporal coordinates, one should apply the absolute truth that distance traveled is the product of velocity and time, And therefore, the spatial coordinate in the moving system is the difference between the spatial coordinate in the stationary system and the distance traveled. As for the time in the moving system, it must be the same as the time in the stationary system, because every point of the moving system at every moment inevitably coincides with a point in the stationary system, which at that moment has the same time as every other point in the stationary system. Forgetting about time and considering only the spatial coordinates to appear that there is a change of length as a result of Lorentz transformations is a sophism, in a sense analogous to the sophism of Zeno's Aporias. For example, the competition between Achilles and the tortoise. If it were just the fact that solely distance has to be crossed, then we have the answer needed. Achilles will always have to reach first the point where the tortoise was earlier, and that will continue ad infinitum. This is not, however, the answer to the problem as to whether or not Achilles will catch up with the tortoise. To obtain the answer, we must realize that there is not only distance between Achilles and the tortoise, but also that they travel a given distance for a certain time, which differs for each one of them. So there is a spatial coordinate, but also there is a temporal coordinate, which must not be ignored. In the sophism, this temporal coordinate, time, is forgotten, and the problem becomes a paradox. Once the time for traveling the distance is considered, it becomes obvious that Achilles, being swifter, will outpace the tortoise. Although the tortoise may be ahead for a while, because of the shorter time it takes Achilles to cover the same distance, there will be a place where Achilles will overtake the tortoise. Considering time, together with the transport through space, solves the paradox. Not allowing to observe only spatial coordinates, but also considering time, proves that Lorentz transformations have no physical meaning. Not only do they not prove length-contraction, but also they destroy the very concept, the very notion of length, and also contradict the absolute truth that in a given place, at a given moment, time has only one single value.